My name is Kevin Martin. I am here with Jennifer Russo for our weekly podcast update from the Lake Erie Regional Grape Program. We wanted to let you know that things look a little different around here. If you haven't heard already, we are in mid-November, and Tim Weigle, our colleague, at least he worked here for 31 years, he has decided to retire, and we will miss him greatly. We wanted to take this podcast to touch on some of the work he's done over the last 30 years. I had the pleasure of working with him for just about 10 and a half, 11 years. And he did a lot of great work before that, but I can't say is that I remember it all. So we are going to do our best to talk about some of the changes that have happened in our industry over the last 10 years because of the impact IPM and that research and extension work had on our program. So going forward, we will not be attending coffee pot meetings with Tim Weigle. We will be making do with my esteemed colleague from Penn State, Andy Musa, and Jennifer Russo and myself. Over the past 10 years, when I first started, Tim had already spent a long time looking at grape berry moth and the evolution of that pest in terms of pressure on our industry as the industry grew and tonnage grew, became more apparent. It became a bigger part of the disease management control and insect management control that growers practice, basically sort of revolutionizing timing because most of the work before Tim's arrival had really been focused on disease management. So timing for insecticides was based on when it was time to spray for diseases. And his work and extension work and applied research work really, it became very clear that with modern insecticides that timing was much more important, that we could not keep things dead in the vineyard for a month at a time. So we actually had to know when to kill these insects. And he did that work, and it worked really well at first. And then we started moving to kindler, gentler insecticides, and the climate started evolving as we saw more and more early springs. When I first started, I was told that there was occasionally an extra generation of grape berry moth, and it could be really costly to the industry because with an extra generation there was more pressure, there was another round of infections that happened as they stung more berries. So we would see vineyards, especially high-risk vineyards, that would have a total crop loss, but only in those years where we had an extra generation. And then I think years 3 through 8 for me, we had an extra generation every year. So things changed, and the insecticides changed, and Tim worked very hard to build a weather network. There was a growing degree model that was developed by work through Cornell and Penn State, and now, as far as I know, I think almost all of our growers that actually have any significant amount of pressure from grape berry moth, at least in part, use that model to time their insecticides.
Is that model comes from the NUA stations, correct?
So that model comes from disease management work or insect management work that a couple of different researchers worked on, and Tim worked really hard to extend that research to our growers. Without NUA, it's really hard to implement that model because we're looking at it's a growing degree day model. We're looking at growing degree days. So the more weather stations we have, the more it's related to your individual site. We see variances in our weather stations across our network, just in our region, where the spray timing, because of differences in growing degree days, will vary by as few as 2 or 3 days in some years, and sometimes as much as a week. We have plenty of insecticides that last less than a week, so if we don't have a good weather network, then this model does start to break down in terms of its effectiveness.
And this is 2 of the wins from Tim Weigle over his career.
Absolutely.
Was bringing the newest stations to our growers and also helping develop these models, correct?
Right. And I mean, the other big thing that happened before this was once I think there was an understanding that insecticides had to be timed to grape berry moth, not to when powdery mildew applications needed to be made. there was a concerted effort to try to rate vineyards, to try to figure out how, to try to actually do scouting protocols, to figure out how much pressure each individual vineyard was going to get. And I think on average, probably most growers saved an insecticide application through that scouting program.
May I interrupt you for 1 second?
Absolutely.
Because then wasn't Tim Weigle also the person who brought and taught people how to actually scout in their vineyards and look for in the time to do that as well?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Very important position.
Yeah. I sound very knowledgeable about all this stuff relative to where I was 10 years ago because of the work Tim Weigle did.
So is it safe to say that his 30 years has really promoted our area and integrated pest management? What do you, I know, maybe you don't know because you weren't here for that part of it, but I know your family certainly was. What happened before he got here? What were tonnages? I mean, did we obviously see an increase in our industry because of the work he brought?
I think it's always been really hard to identify why our industry has improved the way it has. I think if you go back to 1935, we grew about 1.5 tons to 2 tons to the acre, and our elite growers, we had them back then, grew about 2.5 to 3. And we've grown and expanded that. We've cheated a little bit along the way. Sometimes the industry and prices take away the lower producing vineyards, and we've seen that. So that's one thing that's helped our average. But in all, the work of research and extension and chemical companies and growers continuing to expand their knowledge base and machine harvesting and different trellising and better disease control and insect management, everything in total, I think all the growers realize we've gone from that 2 ton to the acre to 7. We continue to struggle and have some zeros here and there, but we really haven't had any weather-related disasters since 2012. So our 5-year average is starting to look extremely high, and it wasn't something that we could do without checking off all these boxes. So as much as I've learned about grape berry moth, we do definitely, we're going to miss Tim in the sense that I think it's very obvious that the pressure of grape berry moth changed. The needs of how we managed it changed. I think, yes, it probably always followed the same number of growing degree days, but to be honest, in 1980, we really didn't need to know that. And I think there should be, there's a critical and sort of obvious need that something else is going to change. And I hope our industry has the wherewithal to respond to it without the expertise of Tim Weigle.
Like the spotted lanternfly coming, it is the next.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little terrifying. Like the writing's already on the wall. It's possible that we don't even have to guess what that change is going to be. It might just be spotted lanternfly.
Right.
And I think, Tim was really involved in spotted lanternfly. I don't think he necessarily led the East Coast in terms of that research because it's fortunately not here, so he fortunately didn't have the opportunity to do that. But he was in a unique position as an IPM person to integrate his activities in terms of extension and also just the applied research and discussing what our needs are as an industry to the people actually doing the research where spotted lanternfly is located, because it's in Southeast PA. It's affecting a very different type of industry than what we are used to dealing with. So trying to figure out how we're going to manage it is going to be very different here than it is there. Their sort of mode of action so far has been to try to keep their vines alive,
Right.
and to pick spotted lanternfly out of their hand-picked fruit.
And for a 6-week period, spray every other day.
Right. And we may have to do that. We we definitely need to get the work done to try to understand what an insecticide program is going to look like in a commercial Concord vineyard. But we know for a fact that we're not going to sort through Concords and pick out spotted lanternfly like you can do with
Hand
Cabernet
harvest.
Franc,
Yeah.
hand harvested at 3 ton to the acre in southeast Pennsylvania, sold for $40 a bottle. We're not going to do that. So as much as we would like to try to rely on that research, and as much as I think it's great that it's happening, we do need a way for that research to be applied to our industry, to a commercial agricultural setting
I
in
agree.
a specialty crop. And like I said, as much as you can call me and I can tell you that because Tim said Intrepid is a better material for spraying grape berry moth, that is our reality now, and we have an okay handle on our reality right now, and I think we are concerned about the future in terms of our capacity to respond to the changing needs of our industry without the expertise of Tim Weigle. I think in that sense he's going to be missed. I think he's going to be missed in coffee pots. I don't think we're going to bring cream to the coffee pots anymore. The coffee's going to be a lot weaker. If you enjoyed that, I apologize.
You might want to bring your own.
Yeah.
Little individual.
Things are going to
ones.
be different. Things are going to be very different. Tim was here for a long time, and he will certainly be missed.
I know that we have a bit of a checklist of things that he actually had his hands in that you and I don't in our roles here on the team. And that would be, obviously, the most obvious is integrated pest management. Then he also had pesticide recommendations, updating the New York and Pennsylvania pest management guidelines for grapes, pesticide credits at the coffee pot meetings. He is the one who is authorized to do that because of his licensing, right?
Right.
And invasive species education, contact and address the continual need to modify spray programs and maintain pest control, and also updating the grape berry moth and disease models on NUA. So that's huge to what our growers use and just in their everyday management practices. And that's going to be missing, at least for a bit.
Yeah, I think I probably fell into a little bit of a trap. Tim always said, growers complained to him, why are you still working on grape berry moth? And Tim had a really good understanding of, made my job easy, of the economic implications of all of the things he was working on. And so his philosophy always was, well, until it's not your biggest problem, I'll continue working on it. But he did obviously find time for a lot of other things. And we just looked through and we sold pest management guidelines to just over half of our growers in the region. It's possible that some of those were sold outside of the region. But that being said, I think it's very well recognized that that's an important tool in terms of having a reference guide to understanding in the field, in a pinch, what decisions you're making in terms of pesticide applications, because it's a complicated decision-making process, and you probably don't want to call somebody every time you need to have those recommendations. And to have a reference guide, I think, really helps you understand firsthand what the different ramifications of pesticides are. So we sold hundreds of copies. I don't update my copy every year, so I have a pretty good idea that probably just about every grower has a copy on their desk somewhere, even if it's a year out of date. And I think going forward, with the loss of some of the staff and researchers at Cornell and all of the people that were involved in writing and editing those guidelines, that's another issue that I think as an industry and as a program we're going to have to try to solve, because the capacity of having the authors to put together that material has really evolved substantially over the last 24 months with retirements. A lot of people, I think, will be missed from grape research and extension because of retirements. And so what we do moving forward will be, I think, defined by the needs of the industry, I hope.
I agree. So thank you to Tim.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, most importantly, like you said, thank you to Tim. And hopefully we see him around at a coffee pot meeting, and we will figure out a way to make coffee the way he likes it for that particular coffee pot meeting.
We'll have cream for that one.
Yes, yes. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for joining.